So, welcome to another edition of the Membership World podcast. And I'm really delighted to have a very special guest of mine and a friend. We've known each other for quite some time now. Heather Lishman, who is the Association Director for the Association of British Promotional.
British Professional Conference Organisers, ABCO.
Who is the Association Director for ABCO, which is the Association of British Professional Conference Organisers. Welcome to the show today, Heather.
Thank you for having me, Gordon. Nice to
Yeah.
be here.
And where's home for you?
The Cotswolds, so
Oh,
just by Broadway. Yeah,
what a
yeah.
lovely part of the world. Yeah.
Yes, very lucky.
It is indeed. So, we're going to talk about, what's changing in the events world, particularly for associations, and what are the new innovations, what associations need to be thinking about in 2024. But before we do that, just tell us a little bit about ABCO.
Mhm. So with the Association for Association Conference Professionals, really, and our aim is to bring people together. So our values of excellence, learning and belonging. We want people to come together and feel like they've got a support community almost. Oftentimes the professional conference organizer within an association actually works in a pretty solo environment, and this gives them the opportunity to network and benchmark with other people in similar roles, and gives them a support to go, oh my gosh, what happens if this, or I've got this challenge with this, and our members are all super helpful and help them to sort of navigate their way through it. So it really is bringing people together to make the industry more professional, or to be seen to be more professional.
Well, that's great because actually it's quite a stressful job, isn't it? I mean, I know for a lot of people, they say, oh, I'd love to work in events. It sounds so exciting. You get to go to all these cool places and do these fabulous things. But I often feel it's like a swan, isn't it? It's the serenity of a great event, but underneath we're flapping away, aren't we, to make sure that everything works as seamlessly as it possibly can.
And it's the months and the years of preparation and build up to those conferences that, and the absolute attention to detail. It never ceases to never ceases to amaze me, the detail that people go to make sure that that event works. And the reason they do it, I'm sure, in this side, and they do it in corporate and things too, but many of our conferences actually have outcomes that change the world. So, it's about sharing medical research or, breakthroughs and different things. And because of that, and because of bringing these people together, that actually impacts on what happens in everybody's daily lives, or what the outcomes might be from if you have some sort of illness or something. So it's super important to make sure that the environment is correct and supportive for them.
I mean, it was fascinating, of course, during COVID when we all had to move virtual, didn't we? Whereas I think there's been a real appetite and a desire to go back to in-person events over the last couple of years now. Why do you think in-person events are so successful, and why do we need them?
They always say it's the sort of the water cooler moments, isn't it? But I actually do believe that that's true. I think virtual worked for having to give out messages during COVID and making sure that we still had governance within the associations and things. There was still education and learning going on, and still gave you some sort of sense of belonging. But it's when you're in the room with people that are similar to you, that you can just share experiences with and talk about the learning that you've had in the plenary sessions. It's those times that really bring people together, make them feel that they are part of that association, that community, and doing good. I really do believe that. I've seen that there has been a change of format to a certain extent with events post-COVID. People are really thinking about how do we make or get our delegates to engage, network. What can we do that could be online that's just giving them information? How can we really maximize when they have chosen to be there and be in the room? How can we make that as special as possible, as impactful as possible. So yeah, it's been an interesting sort of evolvement really of what they've always done.
Mm. And what sort of you talked about event format there. What sort of trends have you started to see with the way that events are being run?
Some people are giving out the content prior to the conference and then talking about that content when they
Interesting.
get there, so that there's that interaction, so that it's not just sitting and watching a PowerPoint. I think there's much more about sort of splitting into smaller rooms, much more workshop interactivity, hands-on, to just sort of make sure that there is that engagement there. People are still doing some virtual, some people are still doing hybrid. You've got that sort of whole EDI thing going on, that, you know, it's important to be able to get people from different parts of the world or different people to the conferences. In my experience, most people now seem to actually just be recording whilst they're there and then utilizing those recordings like you do with a podcast
Mm.
for onward education, rather than it being live streamed. Some will still live stream, but more people, I think, they've realized that that content is educational and of real value, and that they can use it again. But you know, giving real benefit to the people in the room, making sure that what happens in the room is the key area.
Mm. You mentioned there small groups. I mean, that's
Mhm.
music to my ears, actually. In fact, we only met recently on a round table event about AI, and I think the reason why that worked well is everybody had the chance to speak, and it was almost like a dinner party experience without the food.
Mm.
And I absolutely agree with you. The opportunity to listen to other people and question. I think we understand. I mean, there's lots of stats about this, isn't it? The more we engage with content and other people, the more we take in. Because
Mm.
actually, there's only so much content that the brain can absolutely absorb. And when you go to these conferences that seemingly back to back, you know, just as you say, PowerPoint type presentations, you do wonder whether or not, you know, some of that really does deliver in the way that perhaps the organizers want them to do so. So do you see that that's going to be happening more of that in the in the years to come?
I think
Uh,
there's room for both. So at ABCO, we do the same. We have two in-person events where we ask people to literally come together, the whole membership. And then in between that, we have lots of regular roundtables and virtual events where it doesn't matter whether you're in Aberdeen, Torquay, London, you can come together for an hour. So we get
mm,
more people coming to those than would have done necessarily if we'd have just been sort of meeting for an hour somewhere. But for associations and charities, it's part of their sort of CPD, it's part of their reason for being, their annual conference, it's often their money maker for the
mm,
year. And as I said, you know, the research and the things that are shared, getting together all of those professionals from across the country or across the world in one place to really focus on something, then actually the impact of that can be massive.
mm,
Like, you know, the statements that come out from COP, or, you know, those sort of things. If all of those people weren't in the room and there wasn't that mix in the room to sort of really get to the bottom of things, then actually we would be slower at responding, wouldn't we? So I
yeah.
think there's benefits for both.
I mean, obviously, content is king, as we know. But I mean, it's so important for conference organizers, stroke producers, need to really do their research on what are the topics of the
Mm.
future, rather than rehashing stuff that there's already been said before. Because if they want to encourage new people to come to their event and conference, it's so important that they get that content, and even personalizing it as well as anything. Because I know when we sign up to something, we're only interested in ourselves, aren't we?
Mm.
And sometimes when you see an agenda, you'll not always want to see all elements of it. You might want to, or that there's going to be some interesting parts of it and others that are not. So how important do you think it is for organizers to be mindful that that they need to personalize those agendas in some way?
I suppose for ABCO members, because they're predominantly medical research, medical societies, charities, it's a whole committee structure that decides, and it's, you know, they go out for abstracts and have abstract reviews and really, you know, focus on what's coming from those as to what people want.
Mm.
So I think it's quite robust, and, you know, people will put forward, because they've made a breakthrough, or they've done some research that they want to shout about. So I think to a certain extent it is quite democratic for them, and it is sort of, you know, delegates up, you know, pushing up, this is what we want to talk about, this is where we want to go to. And so I think as far as the content goes, that is a relatively straightforward thing for professional conference organisers. Obviously they've got to have the variety of stuff, but it does come from what's happening out there at the moment. I suppose where they're really influencing that as the conference organizer, as opposed to the committee who decides what the learning is to be. The conference organizer will look at whether it's a panel or a workshop or a plenary. They'll make sure that there's a mix of people, it's not just chaps on the panel. You know, are we helping to highlight some of the younger folk coming through in that particular discipline? Have we got women on the stage, you know, people of different ethnic minorities or whatever? So it's up to the professional conference organizer to make sure that that education is packaged in a way that the content is packaged in a way that will be appropriate for all.
You said something earlier about some conferences being, you know, like world changing, like COP and others, and that's a very good example. Now, technology, of course, some of the trends that we saw during COVID advanced hugely in event tech, didn't it? We're now able to understand a lot more about the delegate journey, what they do, and how they engage. That's something that you can do quite easily now, of course, with online events. Do you think people are using digital technology in the same way at physical events, like in person?
I think conference organisers are starting to use, well, they've always used technology. The technology is evolving. We had that conversation the other day about AI and about how that can be used. And people are looking at that for data and analytics and personalising delegate journeys, personalising content to them. It's always got to be balanced with the whole GDPR and what happens to that data. And, you know, all of us are more aware about data and data breaches, and probably a little bit more conscious of that than we used to be. So there's always that balance as to how we utilize AI in an aggregated way, so that it doesn't come back to one individual.
Absolutely. And then, of course, when it comes to events being a lot more sustainable, I know a lot of organizations now and associations have almost got it in their tender documents. You know, how sustainable are you? Show us your credentials. I even saw it on a supplier framework the other day. You know, what does your sustainable policy look like, and a whole load of other questions. So, you know, it's fascinating to see how we're evolving. What are the types of things that you're seeing in the events industry that proves that it's being sustainable?
Oh, well, it goes through the whole chain, and I think that's why it's having some breakthrough, really. It's not just one person, it's not just the responsibility of the organizer or the association. You know, it's, as you say, it's at the tender stage, it's at the proposal stage, where which venues they choose to go to, but also what relationships those venues have with their suppliers. So whether it's with catering or, you know, the cleaning or whatever, what sort of sustainable practices have they got, what sort of lighting have they got, how are they working with local transport hub providers to make it easy to get there, you know, the electric car points if they've got car parking, through to, you know, heating systems, what they do with waste, whether that's delegate waste, whether that's catering waste, you know, that whole sort of delegate journey, really. Things like exhibition boards. I know our members who are exhibition suppliers, they're looking at, you know, they sort of give good advice about not putting dates on stuff to the same extent, using recyclable materials. What are you going to do about the carpet? Do you need carpet in your conference room? If so, can it be recyclable, or could you upgrade slightly and utilize that to go out to sort of the local community for different homes afterwards? So that there are so many facets of it to look at it, and then also to talk to your delegates. You know, are we going to have vegetarian food or vegan food? What sort of, you know, the buffets maybe not quite so much choice as you would have had before. Talk to the chefs about what's the daily, what's in season, what should we be eating that day. So, you know, the whole sort of remit of it, really. You can have those touch points and make a difference at many different stages. And then the delegates, you know, are they coming by plane? Are they coming by train? How can we get them to come on public transport if possible? Are we doing some sort of carbon sort of offsetting scheme
Yes.
for that? So yeah, and you know, people say, well, virtual conferences are so much better, but actually the IT infrastructure and everything that goes with that, it still does use, you know, it's not a completely non-sustainable, a completely sustainable sort of option. So it is, and does that have the same effect? You know, if you're thinking not just about sustainability in a green way, but the economic and the social impacts of having a conference. You know, I'm from Manchester, and you can tell from my accent, you know, the Manchester Convention Centre, you know, bringing in people to the city centre, the benefits that has, the ripple effect that has. If you look at Manchester, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Birmingham, any of these with the huge centres, look at what Excel's doing in their local area and how they're investing in that area and regenerating an area. And you can't say that's a bad thing as well, you know, that's positive. And then a lot of what the conference organisers are doing at the moment is looking at, well, what can my legacy be from coming to that area?
Like they did the Olympics, of course, which is a
Of
very good
course,
example of it. What you're saying is using
absolutely.
the same philosophy as an Olympics, it's slightly in a smaller scale, but
Yeah. Yeah,
that's
and
great.
there's lots of different legacy type projects. There are some that you can just sort of buy off the shelf. You can say, I'll buy into that and I'll do that in that destination, and it's easy for the conference organizer. Some associations, liver disease at Excel wanted to go out to all of the local schools and talk to them about, you know, the function of the liver. They did liver testing for all of Excel employees. You know, there were some amazing different things. I think it was the Labour Party conference went to Liverpool in the autumn, and you know, all different things that they bought in to do helped social enterprises in the locality as well. So people can look at it in all sorts of different ways, but they, rather than just sort of balancing out the carbon, balancing out the green, actually they're making a positive impact. So it's a really special thing to do, and I think everybody gets behind that, as far as, you know, your convention bureaus, your convention centres, your professional conference organisers, the association, the delegates. You can get everybody involved, and, you know, as a mass almost make such a difference.
I love that. And you've just demonstrated a really important message there that, you know, if those organizations were just working in silo, they wouldn't know about what other people are doing with regard to legacies. So it's this sense of coming together and sharing great ideas. You know, I've learned something new just by listening to what you said today, and that's quite transformational. And it gives you ideas about, well, that could work. How could we do that in our association? How could we do that here, even on a small scale, but making a difference and being able to effect change.
We've done it at our last couple of ABCO events. We planted a tree in Telford, and we nominated a couple of charities, and people could bring stuff to put into the charity bags
Nice.
at the Excellence Awards. We did a raffle for coming back to Aberdeen and having a couple of nights in a posh hotel and things, and we made over £1,000 for Meeting Needs, the event industry charity. But we also did some sponsorship stuff where you could buy it was just before Christmas, you could buy a Christmas present for a charity to give to a child that was local to Aberdeen. So we sort of tried to do it with the national charity that's relevant to us, but also with the local charities. And that was so easy to set up. Other stuff that some of the associations are doing is phenomenal and much more difficult to set up, but you can buy into these things. I think in Belfast they've started a thing where you can buy an extra course. You could say, oh, I'll have a cheese course that you don't get, but the money for each delegate, they say, rather than putting this extra course in. So some convention breakfasts are always one of those things, because most people would have breakfast in the hotel before they went to the convention centre, and then there's breakfast at the convention centre. So people are saying, right, okay, well, we'll cut back on that, but we'll donate our breakfast to a child. So there's lots of different ways that these things can happen that just make a positive impact.
Yeah, no, I love that. And obviously some of those things don't all cost huge amounts of money. It's just
No.
about somebody having the will to do something. Super. Now, obviously things do cost money, and one of the biggest challenges with a lot of events is two things: A, making the numbers work and making sure that you've got enough delegates coming through the door. And there's definite evidence that it's getting harder to fill bums on seats. Now, that may well be sort of cost of living and just businesses cutting back a bit. But how do conference organizers, A, balance the books? And then my second question to that is, how do they raise sponsorship in a better way?
They probably it's the same answer to those two questions, if I'm honest. So you have to have compelling reason for people to go. So we've spoken about content and location and networking. You've got to put a good program together so that people want to go. I suppose in the association not-for-profit side, a lot of it is you want to go because you want to understand what's happening in that arena. So to a certain extent, it's maybe not quite so much of a choice as if you were going to some corporate conference somewhere. It is a different mentality, I think, for this. But yes, it is about then sort of balancing that with sponsorships and partnerships and making sure that you have good collaborative relationships with those people. I think no longer would somebody just give you £10,000 or whatever and say, here you go. It's got to be there's got to be touch points through the year. They've got to be absolute sort of show of how you can get a return on investment. The sponsor often wants some content or thought leadership or something like that around the conference. They don't want to just be seen as the money bag or the purse. But I think with the association side, things are booked so far in advance. The relationship building opportunity is huge because they're booking now for sort of 2030 probably for some of the conferences. So the ongoing impact and relationships can really be built and developed. And it's important to make sure that you do that. Delegates understand that if you've got an exhibition and you've got sponsors and things, they're not there to be ignored, they're there to be part of it, and it's because of them that you've got that delegate rate that you've got. So taking the delegate on that journey too to understand the importance of those people. Yeah,
I mean, the other thing, of course, is events are often a sole reason why people join an organization because so therefore having a different price point between the member and the non-member is important. Now, there are also, of course, non-members that just don't want to belong to anything, but
Yeah,
happy to
they
come
just
to
want to come in.
conferences. So we shouldn't underestimate, should we, the non-member revenue
No,
opportunity.
and we do that with ours on our smaller scale with ABCO. We've got member rates and non-member rates. Members can have those touch points all through the year and different benefits, and they pay an annual fee for the privilege. Others just go, you know what, I just want to come for that content, or I want to bring some of my team members just for the content for that time, or and they can do that. So it's important to have that choice, really. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then communications, of course, for events are very, very important, aren't they? And marketing and making sure that
Mm.
and social media has played a bigger role in this.
Mm.
Only because whilst we've always had email marketing, we know that a lot of people just don't read emails, or it comes at a difficult moment. So for organizers, how do you think they can be better at communicating their events? Are there any sort of tips that you can share?
It's so difficult, isn't it? And it is something, and some people have gone back to almost paper invitations because nobody gets anything in the post anymore. So now actually
Exactly,
that's a
yes.
benefit. It's funny when I heard that the other day. But I think, yeah, it's really difficult. I think for us, we just try to get people's dates in the day. Whenever we've got an event, we put the next dates in their diary and talk about that. I think for some of the professional conference organisers, the annual conference is a necessity. It is just something that they will go to. They'll put the
Right.
date in for the next year. I think sort of using social media, talking about stuff like this, talking about what the content's going to be, talking about what some key messages you might learn if you come along. I think in the medical field, if you've got a top surgeon or somebody who's very well respected, and they're coming along, a 5-question interview, why are you coming,
Headline.
or what
Yeah.
content are you providing there? It's getting to those other networks, that with influencer marketing, it's who's got the network that you want to get to, and in what format would they find that that's got some integrity and some value? Is that an interview or whatever?
Well, it's an interesting point. Obviously, influencer marketing can be a key component in
Mm.
driving ticket sales or revenues. In fact, we ran an influencer campaign for the Technology for Marketing show last year, and we found one influencer alone had driven over 80 registrations.
Mm.
Now, admittedly, they were free as opposed to paid, but nevertheless, that was the significant of her influence on her
Mm. But you're
community.
building that community, and
Yeah,
potentially you could charge another time, couldn't you, for
well,
them, I
but
suppose?
what it does do is it just re-echoes what you've said about finding these little uh like groups of individuals that
Mm.
could be the association's mouthpieces. It could be like, for
Mm.
example, those that head up the focus groups. It could
Yeah.
be those that run, in my old job, for example, catalog groups, because they've got a whole bunch of people within that.
Mm.
And if they could, because I know what it's like. If you're a member of an organization, you say, "Oh, you're going to the conference this year." "Oh no, I wasn't sure." "Well, come along; it would be great." And so
Mm.
you're not aware of that, but that conversation might be going on. So
Yeah.
I think sometimes if we can encourage almost like a buddying system, or we've got what I would call the natural, always come to everything type people. If we're able to reach out to some of them and say, "Look, could you speak to half a dozen other members?" Because
Mm.
then it's not a big onus on them, but it sort of spreads the word by word of mouth, even though we're facilitating it.
Yeah, and that's what we do with our industry partners. We say, bring along a couple of PCOs that aren't ABCO members, and
Right.
it's sort of as your sort of gift to them, sort of thing, but it's within their partnership price. I think Vox pops at the conference,
Good idea.
and just sort of making sure you've got some social media presence when it's going on this year, so that people go, "Oh gosh, I'm missing out. I should have been there. I'll put the date in the diary for the next time." I don't think there's a one size fits all. I think it depends on your delegate sort of makeup, I suppose, and what you're trying to achieve with them, and how obligatory it is for them to go, or whether it's a choice for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Heather, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you today, and thank you so much for your time. How can people find out more about you and your wonderful work?
ABCO, www.abpco.org. That's ABPCO, Association of British Professional Conference Organisers.org, or look me up on LinkedIn.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, Gordon.
Welcome to another edition of the Membership World podcast. My name is Gordon Glenister, and I'm the founder of Membership World. This edition is sponsored by our friends at RD Mobile, the complete membership events engagement platform. But before we get started, please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast just to make sure that you don't miss a future episode. Now, in today's episode, I'm talking with Heather Lishman, who is the Association Director for ABCO, otherwise known as the Association of British Professional Conference Organisers. And as you would expect, we're talking all about the events industry, some of the trends, some of the things that are shaping the future of events. That's it for another edition of the Membership World podcast. Thanks again to our sponsor, RD Mobile, and my producer, Neil Whiteside from Freedom One. And until next time, from me, Gordon Glenister, it's bye for now.